While the tanks rolled across Europe, a group inside the SS was actively spending millions of marks on something else at that time. They weren't weapons. They were ancient relics, objects that, they claimed, held a power far greater than anything any army could give. 13 real quests: the Grail, the spear that pierced Christ, the hammer of a Norse god, a sunken island said to have spawned the perfect race. Himmler believed every bit of it. He quite literally sent men to the ends of the earth to try to prove it. Welcome to another video from the History M Focus channel. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like so you don't miss more videos like this. This is a test video with a host. If you'd like more videos with me presenting the whole time, comment down below.
Number 1. The Search for Atlantis. In the back of Heinrich Himmler's mind lived a fixed idea. The Aryans had not originated in Germany. They had come from somewhere else, a lost continent in the far north, swallowed by ice thousands of years ago. He wanted the proof. The legend came from the ancient Greeks. Plato spoke of Atlantis, an advanced island the sea swallowed. Herodotus mentioned Hyperborea, a land beyond the north wind. German occultists merged the two and gave it a name: Thule. Thule was supposedly the cradle of a superior race, blonde and blue-eyed, that had mastered science and magic long before any other civilization. When their land froze, they allegedly migrated south and spread their blood across the world. In 1910, the Thule Society emerged in Germany, a nationalist group steeped in occultism, runes, and Norse mythology. Himmler entered that universe early. For him, it was not fantasy. It was forgotten history waiting to be proven. The problem was simple and enormous at the same time. There was not a single piece of physical evidence for Thule. No ruins, no bones, no ancient map. Just Greek texts and the conviction of men who needed, more than anything, for it to be true. Himmler was not shaken by the lack of proof. In 1935, he founded the Ahnenerbe, the Ancestral Heritage, a research institute within the SS with a clear and massive mission to scour the entire planet for any clue of the lost race of Atlantis. One of the founders was Herman Wirth, a Dutch historian obsessed with Atlantis. He argued that all writing, all religion, every sacred symbol had been born from that primordial Nordic people. Himmler drank in every word. The theory needed a scientific engine. They found one in the Welteislehre, the world ice theory. It claimed that moons had collided with the Earth and caused floods that destroyed entire civilizations, including the one from Thule. For any serious historian, it was pure pseudoscience. For Himmler, it was exactly what was missing. A framework that explained why Atlantis had vanished without a trace, and why nobody could find a single piece of it. The obsession reached strange places. Himmler went so far as to look at Heligoland, a tiny island lost in the North Sea, and see in it an Aryan Atlantis that needed, according to him, to be taken back from the British at any cost. The Ahnenerbe grew to have dozens of departments. It sent expeditions to Iceland, Tibet, North Africa, Russia, South America, the Arctic. Each one carried the same silent question: where are the lost Aryans? Even Hitler thought it was excessive. He questioned why the Germans insisted on proving they had lived in mud huts, while the Greeks were raising the Acropolis, but he let Himmler carry on regardless. The Ahnenerbe machine was already running on its own. No expedition found Atlantis, not a ruin, not a fossil. But the search was never just about a sunken island. It was the excuse that justified every other hunt that would follow, chasing relics and secrets buried around the world. Decades of modern research have erased the idea of Thule as real history. There was no lost race, no continent swallowed by ice. There was a myth powerful enough to send men to the ends of the earth, and it was only the beginning. Number 2, Otto Rahn and the Holy Grail. In 1933, a young German historian published a strange book. His name was Otto Rahn. He was barely in his 20s, and he claimed to have found the trail of the most sought-after object in all of Christendom. Nothing less than the Holy Grail, hidden for centuries. The Grail was supposedly the chalice used by Christ at the Last Supper. Most historians doubted it had ever existed. Rahn did not. He was convinced the cup was real and had survived hidden into the 20th century. The clue, according to him, lay in a medieval poem, the Parzival, written by Wolfram von Eschenbach. Rahn read those verses as an encrypted map pointing to the south of France, the land of an extinct Christian sect, the Cathars. The Cathars had been massacred by the Church in the 13th century. Their last refuge was the fortress of Montségur, high in the Pyrenees. Legend said that on the night before the surrender, some escaped carrying a secret treasure. For Rahn, that treasure was the Grail. He dropped everything and went to France. He explored caves, ruins, and grottos around Montségur, searching for a hidden chamber where the cup could have been stored for 700 years. He returned without the Grail, but with more than enough material for a book. Crusade Against the Grail came out in 1933 and tied together the Cathars, the chalice, and an alleged ancient wisdom. The book fell into the hands of a powerful reader who would change his life forever. That reader was Heinrich Himmler. The head of the SS was just as fascinated by the Grail as Rahn, and he saw in the young man a perfect ally for the Ahnenerbe, even knowing he had no sympathy for Nazi ideology. Himmler offered money and infrastructure. Rahn, starving to continue the search, accepted. He joined the SS in the early 1930s and received funding for a new expedition to the Cathar ruins. The price of that choice would come later. The second search also failed. No secret chamber, no chalice. Rahn wrote another book, Lucifer's Court, in 1937, permanently linking the Grail to the Montségur region. Himmler liked the text. He did not like the lack of results. The punishment was humiliating. Himmler transferred the Grail researcher to a simple guard post at the Dachau concentration camp. The man who searched for the sacred cup of Christ was now watching prisoners behind barbed wire. Rahn could not take it. He resigned from the SS, a dangerous move for someone who knew the organization's secrets from the inside. In March of 1939, his body was found frozen on a mountain in the Alps. The official version declared suicide. To this day, there are those who doubt that version. A man who knew too much, who broke with the SS, found dead from cold on a frozen hillside. Some see suicide, others see silencing. And there is no definitive proof on either side. Himmler's obsession with the Grail did not die with Rahn. In 1940, the head of the SS himself traveled to Spain to the Abbey of Montserrat, convinced the monks were hiding the sacred cup somewhere in the mountains of Catalonia. The reason was almost absurd: a song. Ahnenerbe investigators had found in an old Catalan melody a mention of a fountain of life hidden in a castle in the Pyrenees. For them, it could only be the Grail at Montserrat. Himmler arrived with his entourage of black uniforms. A monk who spoke German tried to explain there was no chalice there. The oldest relic in the monastery was a wooden virgin from the year 880. Himmler left empty-handed. They say that upon learning the Grail was not there, he shouted that all of Germany knew the cup was in Montserrat. It was not. It never was. And the chalice of Christ remains to this day exactly where it has always been. Nowhere confirmed. Number 3, the Spear of Destiny. There is a relic that, according to legend, makes whoever possesses it invincible and condemns to death whoever loses it. It is called the Spear of Destiny. And there are those who swear Adolf Hitler built much of his entire war around that old piece of iron. The story says the spear belonged to Longinus, the Roman soldier who pierced the side of Christ on the cross. The blood of the Messiah supposedly fell upon his blind eyes and restored his sight. From that point on, the weapon became an object of power. Tradition holds that Charlemagne won more than 40 battles with the spear in hand, and that he died shortly after dropping it. The same supposedly happened to other emperors. Whoever holds the spear wins. Whoever lets it go falls. The piece is real and still exists today. It is an iron point about 20 inches long, with the blade cracked and mended with a silver wire. At the center, a nail and a gold band with the inscription, "The Spear and the Nail of the Lord," engraved upon it. It was kept in Vienna, at the Hofburg Palace, among the jewels of the old Holy Roman Empire, and this is where the line between fact and myth blurs. They say a young, failed painter saw it there, even before World War I, and was mesmerized. That young man was supposedly Hitler himself. The story goes that he heard from a guide the legend of the spear's power and could never forget it. That he felt, standing before that old iron point, a connection to something he had supposedly held in a previous life. Nearly all of this story comes from a single book, The Spear of Destiny, published in 1973 by the British writer Trevor Ravenscroft. And serious historians openly treat that book as a fraud. Ravenscroft claimed to have a secret source, a certain Walter Stein, who had supposedly told him everything. Stein died in 1957. The book only came out 15 years later. One historian wrote that the author invented a story and sold it as truth. So Hitler's magical obsession with the spear is a modern legend, stitched together decades after the war. But the part about the object changing hands, that actually happened, and it is almost as strange as the myth. In March of 1938, Germany annexed Austria. Hitler entered Vienna as a conqueror. He went to the museum and spent more than an hour alone before the imperial jewels. Months later, the spear and other pieces were shipped by train to Nuremberg. In Nuremberg, the relic was displayed as a symbol of the Reich's power. As the war turned against Germany, it was hidden with care. First, in an anti-aircraft shelter carved into rock, then in a sealed chamber deep inside a bunker. The spear was recovered by American troops in 1945. And here the legend delivers its final blow. They say this happened just hours before Hitler killed himself, fulfilling the prophecy that losing the spear meant the death of its owner. That coincidence is too good to be true. It comes from the same dubious sources as Ravenscroft. The exact date of the recovery is disputed among historians, and the connection to Hitler's death was never proven. The iron point returned to Vienna, It is there to this day, displayed at the Hofburg Palace for any visitor to see. The object is real. The power was never measured by anyone. Number 4, the Hammer of Thor. The Nazi obsession did not live on Christian relics alone. Himmler wanted something older, more pagan, more German than the Grail. He wanted the Hammer of Thor, the Mjolnir, the weapon of the god of thunder in Norse mythology, capable of leveling entire mountains. In the legend, the Mjolnir could level mountains and always return to the hand of whoever threw it. For the Vikings, it was a symbol of protection and power. For Himmler, it could be something far more concrete, a real weapon, lost in time. In May of 1940, Himmler wrote a letter to the Ahnenerbe. The request was very specific, that the researchers track, across the entire Norse and Aryan world, any record of lightning, thunder, and the flying hammer attributed to the god Thor. The letter went far beyond simple ancient folklore. Himmler believed it was an ancient and highly developed form of war weapon, mastered by the lost Aryan ancestors. The head of the SS believed Thor was not an invented god. He was the distorted memory of a lost technology, a mastery of electricity held by a race that had existed before. If that weapon could be found or recreated, Himmler reasoned, its power would fall into the hands of the Third Reich. The hammer of a god turned into modern weaponry. That was the absurd gamble behind the letter. The Ahnenerbe put people to work on the subject. The researchers combed ancient texts, forgotten legends, and stone inscriptions. They collected statues, amulets, and objects linked to the hammer symbol, scattered across museums and collections in Europe. They gathered a pile of references to the Mjolnir, but the hammer itself, of course, never appeared, because it never existed as a physical object. It was myth, not buried technology. The weapon of Thor remained what it had always been, a story. The failure did not prevent the symbol from surviving the war. The hammer of Thor became an icon among neo-Nazi groups, who still use it today as a sign of strength and pagan identity, emptied of any real connection to the past Himmler imagined. The Mjolnir case shows how far Himmler's mind could go. He was not just searching for a relic to inspire troops. He was searching for a literal weapon, hidden within mythology, capable of changing the course of the war. He searched deeply. He found nothing. There was no hammer and no ancestral electricity. There was only a man with too much power and distorted beliefs, spending the resources of a nation at war to hunt the weapon of a god who never existed. Number 5, the Ark of the Covenant. Every list of relics hunted during World War II eventually bumps into the most famous of all, the Ark of the Covenant, the golden chest said to hold the tablets of the Ten Commandments. And here it is necessary to carefully dismantle a very well-known legend. The Ark appears in the Bible as an object of terrifying power. It supposedly dried up the Jordan River, brought down the walls of Jericho, and killed anyone who touched it without permission, an artifact that mixes gold, faith, and death, irresistible to any hunter. The idea that the Nazis went around the world after the Ark is everywhere, in films, books, and famous documentaries. The problem is that this image was born far more from cinema than from historical archives. It is, in large part, pure fiction. There's no serious evidence that Hitler or the SS organized a hunt for the Ark of the Covenant. The stories of secret operations with grand names and rabbis forced to open the chest appear in sensationalist accounts without basis. But there's a real thread running close to this legend. And it does not lead to Hitler's Germany. It leads to Italy, and to the man who dreamed of rebuilding the Roman Empire, Benito Mussolini, and to the land that, according to tradition, would guard the Ark to this day. That land is Ethiopia. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims to this day that the original Ark is kept in the city of Axum, in a chapel where only a single guardian may enter, the most sacred relic in the world hidden in Africa. In the 1930s, fascist Italy invaded Ethiopia, and rumors began circulating that the Italians had taken advantage of the occupation to search for the Ark on Ethiopian soil. Searches, interrogations, excavations at sites linked to the legend. There are those who speculate that the Vatican itself would have had an interest in the matter. As the representative of Christianity, it would like to see the most sacred artifact in the world in its hands. That would put Rome on a collision course with the Ethiopian Church. But it is important to stress how thin this thread is. Even in the Italian case, there is no concrete proof that the fascists actually searched for the Ark, much less found it. The campaign in Ethiopia was one of blood and conquest, not relics. The Ark of the Covenant is the perfect example of how a story grows on its own. The more mysterious it is, the more people swear that powerful men sought it. The truth is less cinematic, and perhaps for that very reason, more unsettling. If the real Ark exists, no outsider has ever seen it up close. If it was destroyed, nobody knows when or how. And if any 20th century army truly searched for it, it did not leave a single reliable document to tell the story to the end. Number 6, Himmler's Bible. There is a book that became known as Himmler's Bible. It was not the Christian Bible. It was a strange manuscript written in an ancient language that described a lost Nordic civilization, and the head of the SS believed every page. The text is called the Ora Linda. It is written in Old Frisian and claims to cover thousands of years of history, mythology, and religion of a primordial Nordic people. It spoke of a sunken land, of kings and queens, of a race older than all others. The manuscript surfaced in 1867 in the Netherlands when a man named Cornelis over de Linden submitted it for translation, saying he had inherited it from his own grandfather. Even at that time, scholars were suspicious. It seemed too good to be true. Decades later, the Dutch philologist Herman Wirth took the text and proclaimed it authentic. He published a version in 1933 and presented it as the Nordic Bible. For Wirth, there lay the written proof of primordial Aryan greatness. Wirth was a friend of Himmler. He gave a copy to the head of the SS, who became obsessed. The book became the centerpiece of the Aryan fantasy. It earned the nickname it still carries today, Himmler's Bible, a sacred scripture for mystical Nazism. The content fit perfectly into the SS obsession, a primordial Nordic civilization destroyed by a catastrophe resembling the flood. Atlantis, Thule, and the Ora Linda supposedly telling the same story. But not everyone in the party swallowed the story. The ideologue Alfred Rosenberg and his circle rejected the book openly. The dispute turned into a fight between factions, measuring who was the true guardian of Aryan purity within the regime. On May 4th, 1934, both sides faced off in a debate at the University of Berlin. On one side, Wirth and his defenders. On the other, respected academics who said, without any sugarcoating, that the manuscript was nothing more than a forgery. The debate was heated and ended badly for Himmler. The Ora Linda was officially declared a fraud by the Nazi Party itself. The sacred Bible of the head of the SS, discredited in public by his own peers within the regime. The modern academic consensus confirms the verdict. There was no lost Nordic civilization hidden in those pages. Number 7. The expedition to Tibet. In January of 1939, 5 white men in Western clothing entered the sacred city of Lhasa in Tibet. They smiled, greeted local authorities, and looked like nothing more than curious scientists, but they were direct envoys of Heinrich Himmler. The leader was Ernst Schaefer, a German zoologist and SS officer. On paper, the mission was purely scientific, to study the fauna, flora, and peoples of the Himalayas. Beneath it, there was another agenda, and it had everything to do with the search for the perfect race. Some Nazi theories said the cradle of the Aryans was not in Europe, but in the mountains of Asia, that survivors of a superior civilization had taken refuge on the roof of the world. Tibet would be the living clue. Schaefer was not a fanatical ideologue. What he wanted was funding and prestige for his expeditions. Himmler offered both. In return, he expected data to support the Aryan dream. It was an arrangement of convenience. The team carried instruments to measure skulls, noses, and faces. The anthropologist Bruno Beger made facial molds of Tibetans, searching for features that might link those people to the Aryan ancestors imagined in Berlin. The British, who controlled India, were suspicious of the expedition and tried to block the Germans' passage. Schaefer navigated the bureaucracy and managed to enter through the semi-autonomous region of Sikkim, finally opening the path to the heart of Tibet. Behind the scientific facade lay a swamp of occultism. Part of the SS believed in Shambhala and Agartha, legendary kingdoms hidden beneath Asia, places where ancient masters supposedly guarded in secret the lost wisdom of all humanity. These ideas connected to another Nazi belief, even more extreme. The Hollow Earth theory held that the planet was completely empty inside, and that a superior race could be living down there, just waiting to be found. The concept of Agartha had already been explored by occultists like the Russian Helena Blavatsky and the painter Nicholas Roerich. The SS inherited that imaginary and mixed it with their racial obsession. The Himalayas became a map to a spiritual treasure. The Tibetans used the swastika as a symbol of good luck long before any German did. For the expedition, that was gold. It seemed to confirm an ancestral link between the two peoples. It was a coincidence, but nobody there wanted coincidence. For nearly a year, Schaefer and his men documented everything. Thousands of photos, measurements, samples, footage. They built a massive archive on Tibet. They returned to Germany in 1939, shortly before the war broke out. Himmler was impressed with the results. So impressed he even dreamed up a new mission: return to Tibet and organize a pro-German army there to challenge British power in India. The plan, of course, never left the drawing board. Schaefer was rewarded with his own department within the Ahnenerbe. The entire expedition became propaganda. It turned Tibet into a mystical place in German eyes, supposed heirs of an ancient, secret, and deeply Aryan wisdom. Nothing that truly mattered was found. There was no Shambhala, no Agartha, no entrance to the Hollow Earth, no proof of an ancestral Aryan race. Decades later, a dark detail resurfaced. Bruno Beger, the man who made the facial molds, became involved in far worse crimes during the rest of the war. The science of the expedition was just a facade for an obsession that would end in pure horror. Tibet remained Tibet, indifferent to the men who crossed half the world to wring from it an answer that never existed. The expedition returned full of data and completely empty of truth, exactly like everyone before it. Number 8. The Witches of Karelia. In the summer of 1936, an expedition funded by the SS headed to a remote region bordering Finland and Russia. The region was called Karelia, and it was known for one specific thing that fascinated Heinrich Himmler: pagan sorcery still alive. Karelia was a land where time seemed to have stopped. Isolated villages, people who still practiced pagan customs, passed down from generation to generation. For the Ahnenerbe, hidden there could be the lost knowledge of the Aryans. The leader was Yrjö von Gronhagen, a young Finnish nobleman fascinated by the magic of that forgotten region. His interest had caught Himmler's attention, and the SS chief believed firmly that Karelia held remnants of ancestral wisdom. Gronhagen's mission was very specific: to record the chants and incantations of the elders who still practiced the pagan rites of their ancestors, to capture, before they vanished forever, the voices of an ancient world that was slowly dying. He did not go to the forest alone. He took Fritz Bose, a Nazi musicologist and a Finnish illustrator, and a technological novelty for the era, the magnetophone, a prototype recording device. They were going to freeze on tape the sounds of 1,000-year-old sorcery. The journey took them to remote villages, where they found people who seemed to come from another age. Near Swajärvi, they met a white-haired old man with a distant gaze who had never seen a train in his life and had never set foot in a school. Convinced by Gronhagen, the elder finally sang ancient verses, passed down by mouth for generations, evoking a creation story that echoed the Kalevala, the Finnish national epic. Bose recorded every note of that ancient chant on tape. But the most disturbing figure of the journey still awaited them. Near Salmi, in a small cabin, lived Tiwanaku, a 92-year-old seer the villagers called a witch. The locals warned Gronhagen to stay away. He went anyway. He found the old woman picking mushrooms, frail, almost part of the forest. And she greeted him with a sentence that froze him. She said she had dreamed of his arrival 3 days before, and that she knew he had come to take her secrets. Reluctantly, Tiwanaku performed a ritual. She invoked the spirits of the ancestors. But when Bose played the recording back, the old woman was horrified. She believed that capturing her sacred chants was a sacrilege that stole her powers. By the end of the summer, the team had gathered more than 100 recordings. For Gronhagen, they were far more than folklore. They were, according to him, echoes of a distant past, living clues to the origin of the race the Nazis searched for across the world. In Berlin, the SS eagerly awaited the results of the trip. It was convinced that the ancient wisdom of Karelia could, in some obscure way, serve the Third Reich. That in those chants of old men there was, in fact, power to be extracted. What there was, in truth, was an entire culture in its death throes, and a regime trying to plunder it in pursuit of a racial fantasy. The chants were real. The 92-year-old witch was real. The ancestral race behind them, which justified everything, was not. Number 9, the Pillars of Externstein. In the middle of the Teutoburg forest in Germany stand gigantic pillars of sandstone. They are called Externstein, ancient rocks that pierce the sky and cast long shadows across the forest floor. For the SS, they were nothing less than sacred Aryan ground. The stones were formed more than 70 million years ago. Hermits used them over the centuries. But it was only at the beginning of the 20th century that a far darker power fixed its eyes on that ancient place. The Ahnenerbe saw in the Externstein something far greater than simple rocks. It clung to legends from centuries past and declared that the Irminsul had once stood there, the sacred pillar, the world tree venerated by the ancient Saxons of the Germanic region. The Irminsul, according to SS theory, had been destroyed by Charlemagne around 772, during the forced Christianization of the Saxons. For the Nazis, that made those stones a living monument to pagan faith crushed by the Christian church. The Saxons were the type of ancestor the regime wanted. The SS painted them as pure forebears of the Aryan race, examples of the spirit Himmler wanted to resurrect. The Ahnenerbe's mission there was to claim the site as a symbol of the Aryan spiritual heritage, to prove an ancient, continuous, and pure Germanic lineage, linking the Reich directly to the gods and warriors of a mythical past that perhaps never existed. The narrative took deep hold. It became so powerful that Hitler Youth would sing pagan hymns at the site on Himmler's birthday. The ancient stones transformed into a staged platform for a religion that was practically invented. But the real history of the Externstein is more complicated and more interesting. There are signs that nomadic hunters sought shelter there around 10,000 BC Courbercy, and that Christian monks lived in cells carved into the rock centuries later. What remains at the site is a 12th century medieval relief, showing the descent of Christ from the cross, Christian, not pagan, and much of the written record about the actual use of the site in the Middle Ages was lost during World War II itself. The connection to the ancient Saxons and the legend of the Irminsul is today considered unfounded by most historians. There is no evidence that the Externstein were the sacred pillar. The story was stretched just to fit the mold the SS needed. Even so, the narrative created by the Ahnenerbe refused to die with the Reich. It still attracts neo-Nazi sympathizers and modern pagans to this day, clinging to a myth the Nazis carefully stitched together, and that remains stuck to those ancient stones. Number 10, Tiwanaku and the Nordic ruins. In 1928, a tall, sunburned German arrived at the ruins of Tiwanaku in Bolivia. His name was Edmund Kiss, and he carried in his head an idea that bordered on delirium, that this Andean city had been built by Norsemen. Tiwanaku is breathtaking. Enormous monoliths, stone blocks weighing more than 400 tons, scattered at nearly 13,000 feet of altitude in the Andes, remains of a civilization that dominated vast regions of ancient South America. Kiss did not believe indigenous peoples had built it. For him, the features of the site were European. He saw portals he called Baroque, symbols he read as Greek crosses. Everything in his mind pointed to an Aryan origin. He had a theoretical ally. The Austrian Arthur Poznański, who had been studying Tiwanaku for years and argued the city was extremely ancient based on astronomical alignments, numbers that suggested ages of hundreds of thousands of years. Kiss went far beyond that. He concluded that Tiwanaku had been built by Nordic men hundreds of thousands of years ago, under celestial conditions different from today, and he tied all of it, without blinking, to Atlantis and the world ice theory. One sculpture fascinated him in particular, a stone head that, according to him, had Nordic features. For Kiss, it was the missing confirmation, the sculpted proof that a superior race had reached the Andes and built all of it. His ideas were pure pseudoscience, but they struck a chord with the regime. They were published in Nazi Party newspapers, aligned with the racist ideology, and they caught the attention of the man who funded this kind of fantasy, Himmler. Kiss became a well-known figure within the Ahnenerbe. He received Himmler's support for a grand expedition back to Tiwanaku. The plans were detailed. The theories were already being treated as truth before the trip even happened. The great SS expedition, planned for the late 1930s, was cancelled. The war swallowed the project. The official journey that would have crowned Kiss's theory never took place. All that remained was the 1928 obsession and shelved plans. Kiss continued defending Atlantis and Horbiger's ice-covered moon into the 1950s, long after the fall of the Reich. The theory had been buried by serious science for ages, but he clung to it with everything he had until the end. Modern research is categorical. Tiwanaku was the work of Andean peoples, with no connection to Norsemen or Atlantis. The Nordic stonehead existed only in Kiss's imagination. The real builders were there all along. The Tiwanaku case sums up the logic of the entire Nazi quest, looking at someone else's greatness and refusing to accept that another people created it, inventing a superior race to steal the credit, and never, ever finding the proof. Number 11, the bones of Henry I. Heinrich Himmler held a particular conviction about himself. He believed he was the reincarnation of a German king who had died 1,000 years earlier, Henry I, the Fowler, and he built an entire cult around the bones of that man. Henry I was king of East Francia in the 10th century. He earned the nickname because, according to legend, he was mending bird-catching nets when he received the news that he would be king. He defeated rivals, unified territories, and became a mythical figure. When he died in 936, he was buried in a stone crypt at the Abbey of Quedlinburg, founded by his widow, Queen Matilda. 1,000 years later, that ancient tomb would receive visitors once again, solemn visitors in black uniforms. Himmler saw in Henry the first king of Germany and a model of a Germanic leader. The similarity in names helped. The head of the SS began presenting himself as a direct descendant, almost a spiritual successor of the medieval king. On July 2nd, 1936, exactly 1,000 years after the king's death, Himmler went personally to Quedlinburg. It was only the first of several visits. In the crypt where the remains of Henry rested, he conducted a ceremony by the flickering light of candles. He declared the king's tomb a place of pilgrimage for true Germans. The ancient crypt became a sanctuary of mystical Nazism, an underground point where politics, occultism, and the cult of death met beneath the cold earth. Documents later revealed the cold calculation behind all of it. The SS saw in the 1000th anniversary a propaganda opportunity practically fallen from the sky. Henry I served to give the regime an ancient, solid, and glorious historical root. Himmler went so far as to use the king's records to justify atrocities. He said Henry had had the courage to carry out unpopular policies and the power to see them through. The words of a dead man twisted to legitimize the present. Then came the embarrassment. During a solemn ceremony before Nazi officials, something awkward was discovered. The king's remains were not in the crypt. Queen Matilda's body was still intact. Henry's had vanished. Hitler ordered the SS to find the missing body at any cost. The men proceeded to excavate local cemeteries in search of the bones of the first German king, a macabre hunt for a skeleton lost for centuries beneath the earth of the region. In 1937, close to another grand ceremony, the SS miraculously, or conveniently, found a body. Himmler organized a dramatic reburial with midnight rituals and organ music. He declared the king returned to his rightful place. Nobody can guarantee those bones were actually Henry's. They were found under enormous pressure, at the right time, in the right way, just before the ceremony. The true location of the king's remains is, to this day, without definitive confirmation. Number 12. The Lost Aryan Script. In one of the Ahnenerbe's most obscure fixations, the researchers went after stones, more specifically, ancient engravings carved into rock. They were convinced that there lay hidden the lost writing of the Aryans. The focus fell on the petroglyphs of Bohuslän in Sweden, Bronze Age drawings carved in stone depicting boats, figures, and symbols. For the SS, they were not primitive art. They were messages from a forgotten superior race. When Hitler saw a presentation suggesting those drawings were a 12,000-year-old Aryan script, he immediately ordered an expedition. If it were actually true, it would be a writing system older than any other known in the world. The Ahnenerbe went to Sweden to make plaster casts of the engravings, to take them to Germany. The process was poorly done. It caused irreparable damage to the ancient carvings they claimed they wanted to preserve. They destroyed what they came to study. There was an Italian parallel, the rock inscriptions of Val Camonica. And there entered Franz Altheim, with the photographer Erika Trautmann, who in 1937 concluded that Nordic symbols proved that Rome itself had been founded by Norsemen. It was the same logic as always, applied to marks on stone, dragging every ancient civilization inside the Aryan family tree, deciphering a superior script that nobody else could see. After the war, these ideas were discarded. There was no 12,000-year-old Aryan script, nor Rome founded by Norsemen. Hermann Wirth, who had initiated part of this work in Sweden, ended up banned by the local government itself for the damage caused. Number 13. The Hunt for Ultima Thule. If Thule was truly the lost cradle of the Aryans, one question remained. Where on earth was it? For some within the Ahnenerbe, the answer pointed to a real island, frozen and isolated in the North Atlantic, the distant Iceland. The idea came from antiquity, the legendary Ultima Thule, the northernmost land of the known world described by Greek navigators. The Nazi occultists linked it to Hyperborea and the Lost Race, and they placed it on the map of Iceland. Bruno Schweitzer, a member of the Ahnenerbe, had already traveled to the country 3 times. In 1938, he proposed a larger expedition with 7 additional people to study Iceland and search for echoes of Ultima Thule and the Aryan ancestors. The plan mixed science and fantasy. They wanted to study ancient farming practices and architecture, record folk songs and dances, collect soil samples, all stitched together by the hope of finding the heritage of the primordial race. The reaction in Scandinavia was mockery. In February of 1939, the local press ridiculed the expedition. They said it was based on false ideas about Icelandic heritage, and that it sought ancient records that did not even exist. Iceland, in the mind of the SS, was not merely a frozen island. It was a possible surviving piece of Atlantis, a fragment of Thule floating alone in the North Atlantic. One more place where the perfect race might have left its forgotten mark. As in every other search, there was absolutely nothing to find there. No Thule, no primordial race, no Aryan heritage hidden in the ice. Just an entire regime willing to cross the sea in pursuit of a myth to validate its ideology.